the Plants as Teachers discussion here this evening. We are excited about talking about this. This is the kind of thing that gets people like us excited. Plants are some of our best teachers, and you know, there's so much that any of us can say about this, and I think you know, probably some of you as well. So just before we get started, I wanted to introduce us, and so we are 3 herbalists. So normally we're part of this collective that we have called Herbalists and Herbs, and it's a group of 5 of us, and we're all Ontario herbalists, and we have taken to this habit of putting out webinars. Some of them really more intensive and more serious, and some of them over the summer, we're offering a whole bunch of just pop-up free webinars where we're talking about things that, you know, might be a little bit, maybe a little more outside the box, or just like kind of honing in on particular areas of interest to us and hopefully to you. So we've been doing this for a few months, ever since we went into pandemic mode and we all got into using online communication more. And we're having a pretty good time with it. And so if you don't know about us, you can check us out, Herbalists and Herbs, on Facebook. And we have a YouTube channel as well. So some of the videos that we've done in the past are up there, and you can check them out. So, so over the summer with these pop-up videos, we're not all 5 of us necessarily on every time. We're just doing various ones with various members. And so tonight you get the 3 of us. And so I'll just briefly introduce myself. So I'm Tamara Siegel. I am a registered herbalist, and I'm based in Prince Edward County. I live at a farm here, and from my farm, I run a herbal clinic, and I teach classes, and I lead lots of plant identification walks, both here and also around our area. And often I go to people's properties and lead walks on their land to help them know like what's growing on their land that might be healing, and or you know, edible plants and such. So I'm really interested in working with the plants that grow local to our area, the plants that grow all around us as medicine. And I love the weeds. I love the stuff that just shows up, and looking at why is it there and how can it be medicine. And so I'm sort of always interested in talking about that and sharing info about that. And then we have also with us Victor Chironi, based in Toronto, and Penelope Baudreau, based in like Kennington, I think. Something like that, also at a farm. So I'm gonna let you both introduce yourselves too briefly, and maybe I'll go next to Victor, since I mentioned him next. And yeah, tell us about yourself, Victor.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending this evening with us. Yeah, I'm a clinical herbalist based in Toronto, where I see patients for a wide variety of health issues. I perhaps have a special interest in treating mental, emotional types of issues, chronic disease. Yeah, my influences in terms of my practice primarily are traditional Western herbal medicine, but I also have a strong interest in Ayurvedic medicine and Tibetan medicine as well. And yeah, I'll just keep it short, and looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, and Penny, introduce yourself to us all, please.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone. Hope you enjoy yourselves tonight. I've had a little bit of internet problems, so just let me know if you can't hear me. I am a registered herbalist and educator, product development specialist and herbal educator for Faunus Herbs for the last 24 years. I have organized the International Restorative Medicine Conference and Back to Your Roots Herbal Retreat. And I have a small business here on my farm where I have herbal consultations, and I teach as well. But my real passion is working with other herbalists to save traditional recipes and names, and ensuring that all our traditional herbal wisdom remains in the hands of herbalists and herb lovers. And my true love is our botanical sanctuary here on our farm, where I have a home to many at-risk and at-watch medicinal herbs. So basically, in a nutshell, I just love plants in any way, shape, or form. So I also was wondering if you guys have heard, there's a new saying about that the plant lady is now the new cat lady. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but there's actually now a thing where you're plant ladies. Watch out, these might fall under that category. But I have a joke. Do you think I can tell it? So this joke is filling in for Abra. Okay, so a man contracted this rare STD. Didn't know what to do. So, and I want to tell you right at the beginning, this joke was by Aviva Ram, Dr. Aviva Ram, who's an amazing woman. And so she told it at one of our conferences. So anyway, there's this man who contracted a rare STD. So he went to the hospital to get his manhood examined. So he nervously took off his pants and he was like, doctor, can you help me? What's wrong with me? He said, it's so painful down there. So the doctor was like, oh, well, easy. He said, after close examination, we're going to have to cut it off. We're going to have to operate, remove it. And he was like, what? You can't just chop it off. And so, unsatisfied with the doctor's response, he quickly found a traditional healer, as what most people do when they have a problem with modern medicine. So he went to this Chinese doctor who was so very wise in his community. And the doctor, same thing, did an examination, looked very carefully, and he said, don't worry, you don't have to have an operation and get it removed. And the man was like, phew, thank you, thank you. And the doctor said, no, he said, let me just make you up this herbal concoction here, and you just apply it to your regions 3 times a day, and it should fall off on its own in a week.
Oh boy.
So that's it.
Oh, your internet's getting sticky there, Penny, but we got the joke.
Sorry, that's all I had.
Okay, so there's a chance that maybe Penny is going to have to try turning off her video when she speaks and just use her audio, and that might make the connection better when it's time to speak. There we go. Yeah, hopefully that will improve things, but even though it's really nice to see your lovely face, but you know, rural internet is tricky. So actually, I guess we want to get into talking about plants as teachers here. Our idea is that we'll each sort of have a piece that we'll say, but we'll also all get in and discuss what each of us has to say as we go. And if you have thoughts or ideas about anything we're talking about, then please continue to post anything in the chat. And if you ask questions in the chat, we will acknowledge them. Yeah, so, and yeah, we do usually start with a joke, and Abra, who's part of our group, always finds a good appropriate joke, but I think you did great there, filling in for Abra and bringing back Aviva Ram's joke. So there we go. So Penny, do you, on a slightly more serious note, what did you want to talk about here with the idea of plants being teachers? Oh.
Okay, so I'm hoping that you all can hear me.
Yep.
Can you please put in the message if you can hear me okay? And then what I was finding when the title, What Plants Teach Us, what I was thinking was that in my earliest memories as a child even, I find myself being outside, finding peace and solace and love in nature. And I can almost hear the resounding words of inspiration when I'm outside. of thoughts. They speak right through me as if they were teaching me something and they knew that I needed at that exact moment. So it occurred to me that these silent living creatures are also our soulful friends, and that we need to bring some of these inspiring truths and lessons that we can all learn from our plants if we only choose to see them and listen to them. So I actually have them kind of numbered as I was thinking today about what I feel plants had taught me. So the first one was that plants only take what they need to thrive. You know, in our society, we take. And if we watch plants only take what they need to survive. They take the right amount of water. And as we've now learned, they work in this interconnected way where they even share carbon, and they share through mycelium all kinds of nutrients. So they take care and feed one another around them. And that is something that we just, you know, the wealthy keep taking, and not just the wealthy, actually. I shouldn't even say that. Dollar stores are thriving, need to have so many things that we really don't need to thrive. And then for us to understand, number two is that there's this give and take in nature, and that we need to do that as well, because we breathe in the gift of oxygen, and we need it to survive, and the plants give it to us freely. You know, there's no questions asked, there's no expectations, and we get to take. And so again, just while we don't want to keep taking, we want to realize that we too have to give back to the plants. And so I'm wondering tonight if you could even message in the chat section, how are you giving back to the plants? And maybe you can inspire someone by putting some ideas there of what you do, so that other people can think of how they can give back as well, because we tend to just take. But I felt that plants have always nurtured and supported me. So while plants, you know, are living organisms, and they've made the earth so rich and the soil so rich where we can plant gardens and grow our food. But without this proper balance that they have of sunlight, soil, water, a plant can suffer and even stop growing. And it's the same with us. For us to thrive, we need to be nurtured and supported in our lives. So if we take lessons from the plants on how to nurture and support one another, and spend time doing things that feed our soul, like reading books or listening to music, spending time with people who we love, and making time for what we love, because that all makes us be a better person. And I know that sometimes, you know, even when I was little, I can remember being outside, and if I was sad, you know, I would wander into the horses field and just be outside with nature. And people can do that today, just going for a walk and being with nature. They definitely will nurture and support you and hold that space. And then number 4 is that the weak ones can sometimes turn out to be stronger and more radiant. And I'm sure that you can remember back in school, if you actually went to a school where you grew up with a bunch of kids, or if you still live in the same town with kids you went to school with, you can see some little children that you perhaps were with, or that you know, that may have seemed like weaker ones, quieter ones. You know, they can all of a sudden grow and flourish and thrive and just do amazingly well in life, and know how to cope, and just have such an inner strength. And that's how plants so often are. And so it's amazing to see that, you know, we can be like them, and that the weak ones sometimes turn out to be stronger. Me, especially in my family, you know, my position as like a third girl and that, and yet today I definitely am more radiant than I ever was as a child. So, and that is from being with the plants. And I really, truly believe that. You know, you can rise from a rocky foundation where you feel like no seed would even flourish. And sometimes also my fifth one is that there's more there's more than what meets the eye. So sometimes we'll look at plants and we'll think, oh, something's just a weed. We undervalue it. And so Wayne Dyer has an amazing quote, and he says, the only difference between a flower and a weed is perception. And so many times we're quick to judge people or plants. Example of that is a night blooming cereus, and which is a cactus, and as its name suggests, it blooms in the evening. And it would be easy to pass over this plant and think of it as just a plain or even unsightly without. So we need to not underestimate the people in our lives. Sometimes you have treasures all around you and you're just not aware. You need to look for those treasures. And so to try not to judge immediately. And a really important one, number 6, is that sometimes the struggle or getting cut back, like we cut plants back, can actually make us stronger, just like it makes plants stronger. So every experienced gardener knows that pruning certain plants is essential for them to reach their fullest potential. And trees, for example, that are windy and they get the weather, that they actually respond by digging their heels in and growing thicker roots and stronger trunks. So we too are that same way. We can face trials in our life and setbacks, but then we can know that it creates a better you. And for me, that definitely has happened in my life, where I know situations arose where I can come out the other side, and just knowing that I am stronger inside. So I think it's really important. And even to know that you can, when you're out with plants, you can cry to plants. I have gone, you know, when you're upset, you can go for a walk. It is the best healing way of all. And then my last one tonight is number 7, and that is that death is inevitable. And it's interesting because tonight we're doing this talk, and it's actually on the anniversary of 3 years since my mother passed. So from my window right here, I can see a tree that we planted for my mom. And so trees and plants can be used in ceremony for our own lives, which is really important, and they help ground us. So when I look outside, I can see my mom's tree is thriving. My mom, I feel, is still with us, you know, just in a different way, in a different realm. It doesn't mean she's totally gone from me. And it gives me joy. Like when I have several trees on the property, actually, you know, like for my great-grandparents, when it was their 65th wedding anniversary, we have a tree. So whenever I see that tree, it makes me connect to them. So we honor people with trees and plants. And I think it's really a beautiful way, because you nurture them, you take care of them, and then it's kind of like you always have a piece of those people with you. And it's important to remember with this point, you know, death is inevitable, that all creatures die at some point. You know, to live is to die, and to understand that that the death of plants and trees is important, because it shows that there's a book out about trees. I'll try to think of the name and write it in the chat. And they were saying that even a stump in a forest that looks dead to us will still pass carbon and nurture saplings around it. And so what we may think is dead is still working on a different realm that we're not even, visible to our eyes. And so for us not to believe that we think we know it all and that we've got it all figured out. The plants are such a mystery to old mother tree in my yard, actually, that I get emotional about because I so don't want to lose her. But just destroy her stump or her trunk or her, that will always stay until it chooses to just vanish into the earth. So I just wanted to remind everyone that there's so much more to learn from plants, and that their leaves and twigs can open up a new world of beauty and wisdom for us. And that sometimes we only need to walk out into our garden to realize these things and to be open to these. So remember to stop and smell the roses. That's a good saying. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Penny. Oh my goodness, so much richness there to think about. And I see that, on your encouragement, so many people have responded here with the ways that they relate to the plants and the trees around them. And all the different ways that they show their relationships by, Beverly says, feeding her soil with compost, and Jen says, growing a garden, composting again, thanking the plants when I harvest from them, and talking to them all the time. A few people mentioned talking to the plants, not using toxic products. That was what Marg said. And Maria, picking up trash. So when you go for a walk and you see trash on the trail, picking it up out of respect for the plants and the trees, and being mindful of what you put in the garbage and in the drain, trying to make things less toxic. Trying to learn about their gifts and healing properties. Leslie suggested that, so that you can appreciate them more. Well, I think that's what we're doing. That's what we're about, learning more and more about their gifts and their healing properties, and then it just deepens our appreciation for them. Learning resilience from them, how to survive and thrive during challenging times. Yeah, so that's echoing stuff that you were saying, and ways to support others in need. It's just so rich. Oh, and Monique says she loves to talk to them and protect them, avoiding toxic materials as well. And Lise grows a huge garden with a huge variety of veggies and herbs and native plants, and even, quote, weeds without any toxic products, and attracting lots of beneficial insects. And so I'm just sharing because we'll have a video recording of this, so the chat won't show up there, but people that are watching later will know that everybody is getting involved here in different discussions. Trees being planted. Annette said, my children planted a tree for me and my late husband for my 75th birthday 6 years ago. And I am currently reading a book, maybe some of you know, called The Over Story. And it's a novel, and it's about the relationship between humans and trees. And it's just, it's really, really wonderful. It's really inspiring. And then the book that Penny was referring to, I think it was, The Secret Life of Trees by Peter Holbein, where he talks about all the different ways that trees are in relationship to each other. And there is just so much that we can learn from the teachings in that book. That's really a lot to digest. If people have other thoughts, continue to add in, please. And Victor, do you have any thoughts, anything you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much that was brought up. I was reminded of a quote by the American author Emerson when Penny was talking about the perception or misperception of the so-called weed. And Emerson said that a weed is simply a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. And this is one of the ways that plants are our teachers, is that when we tune into the frequency of plants, when we tune into the life-giving and generative powers of plants, they teach us how to perceive the world in a new way. And this ability to shift our perception in ways that we couldn't even imagine is something that the plants offer. And another quote, famous passage from William Blake, where he says, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And this is the thing, when we're able to perceive plants in a very intimate way, our perspective on the world opens up into dimensions of really the infinite. And one way that we can learn to develop this perception, which is an ongoing project, we never reach a final destination when it comes to working with plants, which is one of the great things about herbal medicine, is that plants really have infinite things to teach us. And one individual can never even come close to encompassing all that there is to know, or all that there is to experience in the botanical realm. Yeah, so one method of learning to cultivate this relationship is sitting with a flowering plant for about a week, and spend 10 minutes a day with an individual plant. And every day, note the differences, note the minute changes or maybe dramatic changes that you're seeing from day to day. And when we do this, it's a training of our perceptual abilities, but it's also teaching us about all of the changes and cycles in the natural world. And like Penny was saying, plants teach us about life, generation, reproduction, decay, death, destruction, and unitive creative expression. And that comes through learning to observe the patterns in nature, the patterns in the natural world. And one of my favorite ways to start on this path of the direct observation of the natural world is to just choose one plant and sit with it and return to it day after day, just spending 5 to 10 minutes and closely observing what that plant is showing you at a given time.
Lovely. Yeah, it's amazing, just giving some extra, a little bit extra time and focus and attention, what comes through, just to slow down a little closer to the pace of the plants and the trees. Yeah, thank you. So, and meanwhile, yeah, the comments are pouring in, and so this is great. I really, I know there's a few books that have been mentioned, and one, I know, Monica, you asked me who the author is of The Overstory, and I think it's Richard somebody, but I don't have it in front of me. I'm not gonna go look for it right now. So if anybody knows the author of The Overstory, please chime in, but otherwise, you can Google it. Richard Powers, thanks, Mom. That's my mother's in here. She she gave it to me. Thank you. So she knows what I like. So Richard Powers is the author of The Overstory, and then also was mentioned Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. That's from Mamoon Goddess, who I think is from Vermont. So welcome. Braiding Sweetgrass, beautiful book. Robin Wall Kimmerer really does help draw on her relationship, exemplify for us her relationship with the earth as really being a living being, and the ways that we can partner with the earth in everything that we do. And just sitting with herbs. There was another, or with plants in general. Oh, somebody also mentioned the Giving Tree. Monique mentioned The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, children's book. Really special children's book that's all about, a relationship with a tree from boyhood, from a boy until he was an old man, and he had this relationship with the tree throughout his whole life, and how it changed as he changed. So that is a special book. It has a special place in my heart as well. And Krista mentioned plants as our ancestors. So, and we think about plants as being sort of older and wiser than us, I think. They move slowly. They kind of give to us unconditionally. I have heard them compared to our grandparents, and I really like that comparison. my piece that I wanted to share here is a little bit more specific, and it's actually more visceral, what I've learned from plants. I wanted to share about my experience of learning more about plants by actually taking them in, ingesting them, so herbs. And this is a story that is about ginger, and it's about two kinds of ginger, the wild ginger and also the cultivated ginger, which are actually two different, they're not related, they're two different families of plants. So it's only their common names that are related, but they have similarities in some of their properties and in their flavor and their smell and such. And with both of them, it's a root that you use. So I have a picture here of wild ginger, and this is a plant that grows, we can find it here. You know, you can find it in a lot of different temperate forests. It's in the forest. This picture is showing it in a bit of light, but normally it would be, it likes darkness, likes moisture, likes tree cover, and it has these really velvety heart-shaped leaves and these beautiful, like brownish purple flowers that will you don't even really see them unless you, like, they're kind of facing towards the earth, and you have to turn the leaves upwards or turn the flower upwards in order to see it. So wild ginger, it grows in these ecosystems that are kind of sensitive, like it grows in forests. And our forests are challenged and becoming fewer. And you know, you can cultivate it if you've got a kind of a moist ecosystem and a shaded ecosystem that, like, where you can have a garden. But it's not that easy to come by. So it's an herb that you don't find that much in commerce. And it's also not one that I would normally, like on a plant walk, I wouldn't normally like point it out and encourage people to harvest it, not at all. Because you harvest the root of it, just like the root of like ginger root that we use in cooking. So you're killing the plant when you harvest it, and you're usually, you know, you're going into an ecosystem that's a bit sensitive, and you're you know, you're causing harm where you don't necessarily need this plant. It has some beautiful properties, and it has some helpful properties with pain relief and with helping digestion and such, kind of similar to the cultivated ginger. But there are other herbs that you can use. However, when I was a student of herbal medicine, and I used to live on Vancouver Island, and my first teacher of herbal medicine, Sheila Mackenzie, out on Denman Island, she would introduce us to a whole bunch of different plants. And I did this course with her throughout a year, where we would go out and identify and wildcraft and make medicines. And she introduced our group to wild ginger. And it was really exciting when we found it. And I was thrilled, because I didn't know that wild ginger was a thing, that it existed, that there was a wild ginger. And when we dug up the root, and the smell of it was just unbelievable. It smells like ginger. It's amazing. And so she said, yeah, you know, you can use it like ginger. You can make tea with it. And she said to us, you know, you need to be a little bit cautious with it, because it will help if you have a bellyache, like the same as ginger. It'll help to calm your, you know, if you've got cramping or nausea or whatever. But if you have too much of it, it can actually be emetic, can actually make you throw up. So we all got some to bring home. We harvested a little bit, and I brought it home, and I was pretty excited to try it. And I got overzealous, and I I thought that the amount I was having was not that much. But I brewed a brew that was probably too strong. And this evening, before I was going to bed, I made a pot. I asked my husband if he wanted some, and he had a little bit, and I had the rest of it. And then I went to bed. And then I was lying in bed, and about 20 minutes later, I started to feel really, really wonky. And it turned out, oh yeah, I was pretty nauseous. And actually, I got up, and it was not a fun night, I have to say. That was a teaching that really hit me pretty hard. Viscerally, physically. So, you know, I developed a healthy fear of wild ginger. And I actually, if I've ingested it since, it's been maybe a tiny, tiny amount added to a meal, but that's it. And this is part of the reason why I wouldn't encourage people to harvest it and use it, because I have had this experience. So not only because I think it's depleting its, you know, and damaging its ecosystem, but, you know, I came to realize, like when you're working with herbs and you're harvesting them from the wild, a little can go a long way. And especially if they're herbs that you're harvesting the roots of, and especially if they're herbs that are growing in sensitive ecosystems, they are medicine. And even if they have a beautiful aroma and they're named after a regular culinary herb and you're excited to try the wild version, you approach it with respect and you approach it slowly. And, you know, and also when you're wildcrafting, if you're harvesting something new, when you're foraging as well, that you just try in really small amounts and you see how that works. And it's not, you know, it's not the same as the stuff that you're buying in the grocery store, or even the herbs that you're going to buy like in commerce at the herb shop or whatever, in the bulk section of the health food store. It is a different thing. And so that was a really big teaching for me. And then the other piece happened with the real cultivated ginger. So with that, you know, that's a herb that we all, if you're studying herbs, you'll learn about ginger. So same thing, you have a stomach ache, you got nausea, you can take ginger. And if you have too much, as far as I know, it won't make you throw up. So that part is good. It's safe for anybody. It's, you know, it's a food. It is also very warming, and it stimulates your circulation, and it'll get your circulation going to your periphery, to your hands and feet. And so I tend to get cold hands and feet. I tend to be a cold, like I run cold, you know, I love the sun and the heat. And in the winter, you know, I struggle more. And so, I was in herbs school. I was studying in Toronto at that point. My teacher at that time was Diane Kent, wonderful teacher, and she was teaching clinical herbalism. And we had been learning about ginger, and it was on my mind, and we had some. So I decided, okay, I'm going to make this cup of tea because it was winter. My hands and feet were cold. I'm going to drink this tea, and it's evening. It's close to bedtime. I'm going to have this nice cup of tea before I go to bed. Now, ginger can be stimulating, and it could potentially keep you up. So I don't necessarily, at this point, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as a nighttime tea. And I knew that at the time. But you know, I'm a person that drinks caffeine in the morning, and I'm not like super sensitive to stimulants like other people. So I figured, you know, that would be fine. Again, I made myself this strong brew. I made a decoction instead of an infusion. So instead of just pouring hot water over the herb, I chopped it up. I put it in a pot with cold water and let it simmer till it heated up. Let it simmer for about 10 or maybe 20 minutes in the pot. So it got extracted all this ginger properties into it. And I drank 2 or 3 cups of this pretty strong brew where I had quite a bit of ginger in there. And you know, thinking now I'm gonna warm up, and then I'll go to bed and I'll be warm. And anyway, so then I go to bed, and there I am in bed, and I start shivering. I'm just like uncontrollably shivering. I thought, oh, maybe I don't have enough blankets. I got another blanket, and I couldn't warm up. And it was like from internally, I was shivering. And I thought, what's going on? Like, ginger is supposed to be warming, and I'm actually feeling cold and shivering. What is happening? And it took me a while to move through that. I kind of just had to, like, I was shivery for a while, and eventually I fell asleep, and I put on an extra, you know, like I added more blankets, more warm pajamas. Eventually I fell asleep. So when I saw Diane, my teacher, the next time, I told her this story, and she said, you know, the way that ginger works, it is warming, and it stimulates your circulation by going to your core where all your heat is, and then allowing that heat to radiate out throughout your whole body so that it's circulating. So it stimulates your circulation, and it distributes your heat throughout your body. But if you do that too strongly, too intensely, then all that heat that was held at your core can get dissipated so much that it actually just radiates off of your body, and your response is going to be shivering. Your body's response is going to be to try to warm itself up again and regain some of that core heat. So again, I realized, you know, the dosage of the medicine that you take really makes a difference. This herb that can make you warm, and everybody says it's going to make you warm and stimulate your circulation. Well, if you have too much of it, it's actually going to make you cold. It's actually going to make you shiver. And you need to pay attention to that. And that helped me to understand that when I'm working with people who come to see me in my practice, then sometimes if I give them a medicine and the response that they get is not what we're going for, it's the opposite of what we're going for, maybe they need to have a lower dose, or maybe we somehow need to change the dose. And that's something that you need to consider and keep in mind when you're working with herbs. So those are the teachings that I got from the gingers, really on a more visceral level. Any thoughts there? Anyone want to add anything to that? Penny, you want to add anything to that? Or Victor? How about Victor? Because then you're going to speak last. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting story, and it just speaks to how individualized, herbal medicine has to be. We're not treating generic disease entities, we're treating specific individual people. And yeah, I mean, some people might require just a couple drops of a medicine, other people might require a teaspoon, maybe even slightly more. And so, part of what is required when we're working with herbs is a very highly refined and developed understanding about the constitution of the individual person and how that constitution is best treated, not only when it comes to the plants that we're using, but also the methods of administration and overseeing the treatment as it unfolds. And yeah, it's what you said brought up a lot of points about how to respectfully and appropriately approach herbs, because something that you can take a little bit of and get excited by and think is so great, if you go past it, the limits of what you should be taking, then it's going to really it's going to make that you're going to become aware of that pretty quickly. So yeah, there's all these intricacies, and that's one of the beautiful things about herbal medicine, is that it's not just a puzzle where the pieces go together in a particular way. Sometimes it's like that, but sometimes the pieces are shifting, and we have to pay attention to the ways in which the image on the puzzle is changing, and how the pieces themselves are being rearranged as treatment unfolds.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Penny, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes. So that was great. I really enjoyed that about the gingers. And I loved the comment about it's like versus a wild Mustang instead of a captive horse. It was a good analogy. That was great. But I had a similar experience with ginkgo, where I would take ginkgo at work, and I love ginkgo, and I just think it's so good for me, and I can't say enough about it. But two of my colleagues took it, and man, they couldn't handle it. And they said it was like it made their hands work faster than their brain. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Because for me, I had no such feeling. So it taught me how, while it can be my herb and I love it, it's not everyone's friend. And so sometimes, you have to just choose a different, more mild herb for somebody else, or just realize maybe the dose, like you said, Tamara, too high for them, where for me, I didn't notice a thing, like I'm just not sensitive that same way. So just an experiment, just so that you don't have an episode like you, Tamara, in bed at night. Not feeling
I don't recommend it. That's great. Thanks for sharing that story. And I see, someone said, Monique, she had a similar reaction to too much turmeric. So turmeric also is very warming. They're closely related, actually. So that makes sense. So Victor, I want to pass it over to you.
Okay,
what do you
great.
have to say about plants as teachers?
Well, let's get started here. Yeah, so this is a broad topic, and there's so many different ways that we can discuss plants as teachers. And I just want to start by thinking about the kind of ancientness of herbal medicine. And I often think that ancient herbal medicines come from psyche, come from the soul of the earth, and they're manifestations of that soul. And that soul or that psyche is something that is cosmic and collective. And it includes the structure of botanical forms, just as it includes the structure of animal forms in its meaning. And these meanings, unfortunately today, lie outside of the more limited mind psyche of science, which tends to be more concerned with facts, with things that can be clearly and distinctly measured. And so, when we're talking about plants as teachers, we're talking about this shared ancestral lineage that connects us to generations that go back to the beginning of time and beyond. So we're talking about a repository of knowledge and a repository of wisdom and a repository of experience that courses through our veins, just as it courses through the veins of our oldest ancestors. And I like to think of plants and of herbal medicine in terms of what we can call an image. And I find that plants speak in a language of images. And I wanted to kind of explore this notion a little bit. One of the ways that this image is available to us, the image of an individual plant, is as I was talking about before, through the process of observation. And I want to share these passages from a great 13th century Indian saint, Janeshwar, and he has some great things to say about the observation of plants and the insight that comes through those modes of observation. And one passage, he says, "A tree spreads its foliage and produces flowers and fruits, even though it has no objective outside of itself." Another one, he says, "A Shavanti flower," which is a chrysanthemum flower. So a Shavanti flower bursts forth with 1,000 petals, yet it does not become anything but a Shavanti flower. And here we have these images of abundant life and abundant vitality. And so this is one dimension of an image of a plant. The image of this 13th century Indian saint is giving to us of plants that produce and produce and produce without any objective outside of its own activity, of its own inherent activity. And this is one of the things that the observation of the plant world can teach us, is it teaches us about purpose and teaches us about meaning and teaches us about learning to tap in to our own inherent potentials, our own inherent capacities, and to cultivate these rather than to be guided or rather misguided by a world which places demands upon us that don't feel right for us. And so many people today have this sort of experience where they're caught up in a system, or they're caught up in a lifestyle that when they really sit with the feelings that lifestyle generates in them, they sense a tension, they sense a kind of distortion, a discord. And this is a kind of imposition of an image of life onto an individual person, an imposition of a construct, a programmed way of existence. And plants don't do that. Plants can't be programmed. The life of a plant is its own inherent expression, its own truth, speaking through it from every stage, from seed all the way through to flowering and at the end of life, then producing seed again. And that is a cycle, that is a process that is designed by the mind of nature, not by a corporation or by someone sitting around thinking about how he thinks or she thinks things should be. The mind of nature is ultimately the great teacher when it comes to the teachings of plants. And it's the mind of nature that is guiding us when we get into this realm of working closely and intimately with plants. And so one thing about this discussion of images, so these images that we live with from day to day, the images that we see on our computer screens, that we see on our phones, these are programmed images. And a programmed image is by definition not something that's universal, but is designed for specific outcomes, right? A plant doesn't have a specific goal in mind apart from expressing its own inherent nature. But many of the images that we could say, programmed with today have specific outcomes in mind. And they generate mental states, emotional states, feeling states that actually make us become disinclined and distanced from this realm of universal truth. And that's one of the great gifts that working with plants teaches, is that it teaches universal truth. In the domain of medicine, I mean, I like to say that medicine is, we could say, a restoration of what belongs to nature. And that includes when we're working with an individual person. When we're working with a person on an individual basis, we're working to restore the vital force in that individual. We're working to restore that individual's integrity as a bodily being. And so, yeah, just as the constant consumption of things that go against the individual's bodily nature ultimately affects the integrity of that organism, so too a constant consumption of programmed images engenders the belief in us that images are things that have no power. But as Carl Jung says, image is psyche, image is soul. And I'd like to say here that the soul of nature speaks through images, speaks through this capacity to generate novelty through image. And it's by way of these images and through immersion in this realm of images that I feel the great teachings of plants are offered to us as humble and eternal students of the botanical world, of the green world. So I'm wondering maybe if we can open it up now for a bit of discussion, or if anyone in the audience has comments or questions.
There's been some good comments that have been showing up all along. I think Jen commented, it's a beautiful message. Plants teach us how to live authentic and true to ourselves. Mm-hmm. And Leslie says, the life of a plant is its own inherent truth, which is in quotes. So maybe she's quoting back. Yeah, anyway. And the writer Wes Jackson speaks of the genius of place, meaning the wisdom of ecosystems and the plants which coexist and support each other within each ecosystem. That's the wisdom of place. That's from Melissa. So yeah, which is echoing what you are talking about.
Yeah, and you know, there's so much disunity in the world today. And we don't need to list examples. Of anyone listening to this can come up with probably hundreds. And you know, one of the things that plants teach us is how to become in touch with the lost unity of the world. This is really a crucial teaching today when we're facing wide-scale ecological devastation. The plants show us the way towards restoring this unity of the natural world, and by extension of the cultural and social world that has been lost. And you know, the way that a particular culture treats nature, the way that a particular culture thinks of nature and relates to plants, really reflects the social forms that then emerge. And you know, the fundamental point of orientation is how we perceive and relate to the natural world, and everything else follows from that. And that's one of the great gifts of herbal medicine, is that it teaches us to again step outside of this limited sphere of awareness where the only things that are perceived of as true are the things that can be calculated and measured and cut up and dissected, and that, you know, is held up as the standard of objectivity and truth. Plants teach us to expand our conception of truth into something more cosmic and more universal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And Penny, did you have anything to add here? I saw you wrote that we need the plants, they do not need us. And there's more comments coming in, but yeah, any thoughts?
Yeah, you can share the comments that are coming in tomorrow, because that's really important. They're good points.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we had, what have I not mentioned? Monique, lovely. This is for Victor. I hear your message and strive to dispel social messages about who or what we are and get in touch with my true nature. So, yeah, I think that's mostly what we haven't mentioned. And then yeah, I mean, this is a huge, like, we can all really walk away like with this in our thoughts for the rest of the evening, possibly, you know. But anything else to add at the moment before we close?
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, we can talk a little bit about healing as a teaching, right? And you know, when we're healed by plants, our life isn't really the same. And this is such a beautiful experience and such a precious opportunity that we have as practitioners, is to see the healing process unfold before us, and to see the dimensions, such deep dimensions of change that take place when a plant heals a person. And, you know, these are dimensions that are not only physiological, but psycho-emotional and interpersonal and ecological. And really, you know, I like to think of healing as removing what works against life's capacity to renew itself. And when we're ill, when we suffer from dis-ease, we could say that we've lost, or our capacity for continual self-renewal has been hindered. And when we're healed by a plant, this capacity is brought back in many, many, many different dimensions, this capacity for continual novelty and renewal. And really, that's another way of saying tuning in again to our true purpose and our true meaning on this planet, and being able to exist within that sphere. Mm-hmm. Right? Just like the quote that I shared at the beginning, a tree spreads its foliage and produces flowers and fruits, even though it has no objective outside of itself. And so this tree, it's living its own truth. And as a result, as a consequence of doing that, it provides fruits for all of the other beings who come across it. And when we're able to enter into this healing dimension offered by plants, then it has a ripple effect. And it affects not only the integrity of our own organisms, but the integrity of the world that we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And thanks for repeating that quote. And Jen says, she had made a few comments here, but I think I'm going to try to summarize briefly, or her last comment, that we need to, if we can both collectively and individually work on our own process of healing, if we can do our inner healing, then we can also heal externally, because they're micro and macrocosms of each other. Now, I want to mention that we posted up here ways to reach Penny, ways to reach myself. Victor, you should type in there your website.
Sure.
And then all of our websites are there in the chat. Penny's at theginkgotree.ca. I'm at hawthorneherbals.com, and Victor ChironiHerbalist.com. So you can reach all of us there, and you can find us Herbalists and Herbs on Facebook if you want to see what's going on with us there and figure out how to find, access us there. We have a tradition also that we didn't do at the beginning, so we're going to do it at the end here, where Penny has a deck of beautiful cards with different words, messages, thoughts that we can pull and then offer to the group, and then you can we can leave each other perhaps with that thought. So Penny, you got a card for us?
I do. The card says change. Falling leaves do not signify the end, but the beginning of a fruitful season. I'll read it one more time. Change. Falling leaves do not signify the end, but the beginning of a fruitful season.
Right.
Thank you all for joining us.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you for all your comments. And we're going to be doing this again in a couple weeks on August 5th, and the topic is herbs and elements. So we're going to talk about the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, water, and how they resonate with the herbs. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Check out our Herbalists and Herbs Facebook page, etc., etc. Thank you. All the thank yous are coming in, and really thank you to all of you, and thank you, Victor and Penny. And yeah, change, falling leaves, not the end, but the beginning. So let us leave each other on that beautiful thought, and let's all pay attention to the teachings of plants as we move forward. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Be well.
Bye.
Yay. Good night.